So I actually wasn't even aware this was coming out all at once. Like I assumed like normal Hulu TV shows would come out one at a time. So when I got on Hulu at 9 p.m. at night and saw all of these here, I just kind of watched them all, and by the time I was done, it was early morning. Looking for Alaska is an American teen drama web television series adapted from Looking for Alaska from John Green, who you probably know of, made by Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage. It follows teenager Miles, who enrolls in a boarding school in high school to try and gain a deeper perspective on life and discover his great perhaps. After an unexpected tragedy halfway through the school year, him and his friends must adapt and try and make sense of what has happened. Making a review on this is actually quite surreal to me. It's not an understatement when I say that I've been waiting for this for somewhere around a decade. Looking for Alaska is the very first book I ever read by John Green, and it led me down a rabbit hole. John Green went on to be my favorite writer, inspiration for me to become a writer, a voice for mental illness, and my all-time favorite YouTuber, along with his brother Hank, of course. Having said all of that, it gives me great pleasure to say that this mini-series lives up to my immense expectations. Like, nobody could have had higher expectations than me, and it completely lives up to it. And Hulu doing it as a miniseries is probably the smartest thing they could have done. I don't really see them accomplishing what they did if they did it as a movie. If you haven't read the book, I recommend you go do it now. But even if you haven't, it's completely fine. You don't need to watch this miniseries. Even though reading the book gives you an entirely different perspective on this, you really don't need to enjoy this adaptation in its entirety. Speaking on that, this is actually the most faithful adaptation I've ever seen from a book to a movie or film or TV show, whatever medium. I listened to the audiobook to prepare for this, to brush up, because it's been probably about 7 years since I read Looking for Alaska, and they remade most of this down to the sentence. They seem to touch on almost every single moment throughout the entire book in this miniseries. And normally, I would count that against something. Cuts are needed, and things need to be left out to keep the momentum and keep movies and films and TV shows, blah blah blah, interesting. But it was interesting throughout this entire thing, and I'd say it was almost needed. What honestly surprised me most was a blowjob scene that was kept in. Obviously they didn't show that. They wouldn't be able to on Hulu and keep it with the rating that it has, but it was something that plagued John Green for many years, and a lot of people even called him a pornographer. And I really respect the fact that they kept it in, because it's pretty important to the story. It's meant to show the difference between physical and emotional connection, and without narration, I'm really surprised at how well they pulled that off. The characters in this were absolutely awesome too. Like, I know nothing about any of them. I recognized a couple faces, but the main four were plucked from obscurity and really pulled this entire thing off. Now, normally I don't worry about names, but I feel it's important you know them. It's Charlie Plummer, Christine Forsyth, Jay Lee, and Denny Love. I wanted to make sure they're right, so I read it. I have to say, Charlie and Christine did an amazing job of showing me that two people I originally thought were horrible for each other ended up being perfect for each other. Jay Lee as Takumi was also really nice. They kind of went away from the books in this, and I'm very okay with it. His style and swagger was awesome, and he was funny and witty in a dry kind of way and provided a voice of reason. I'm not sure he was supposed to be a standout, but for me, he was the most of the standout. Every single one of them, though, had two tasks that could have made or broke this series. One is they had to be complete dickheads at one point without getting us to fully hate them. And that's a very fine line. And two, they had to read dialogue written by John Green convincingly. The only complaint that I've ever had about John Green is that he's an incredibly smart man, but an incredibly smart man that sometimes has difficulty writing realistic dialogue for teenagers. So sometimes, yeah, like, you can see that in The Fault in Our Stars and Paper Towns, when it's dialogue that teenagers wouldn't normally have, and it kind of takes you out of it. But I feel like they did it really well in this. Kind of helps that they're in a boarding school for real smart people. I'd also like to give a shout out to pretty much every single side character, especially the Eagle. If this were a movie, we wouldn't have been able to explore them as much. So I'm really happy it was a miniseries. Oh, also the old man, fantastic. I've also heard a lot of complaints about all the drinking and the sex and the smoking and the sneaking out and the swearing and all like that. But that's not a bad thing. That's a great thing. It's realistic. It's what a teenager's life is actually like. It's groundbreaking, and it's what made the book so good, is that it was very honest about what teenagers actually did. And even back then, when the book was released 15 or so years ago, it had a lot of controversy behind it because of that, but it's still a good thing that it shows it. This show is rated MA, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I do understand why. Teenagers can handle watching this, though, because they live this. This isn't a glamorous show of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's an honest image of what life is like, the struggles and the friendships. In the end, no one had higher expectations or higher desires for this than I did, and it completely lived up. It is an honorable adaptation, and I would recommend it to anybody, and I'm going to watch it many times over. I give it a 9.8 out of 10. So thanks for watching, guys. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and check out my other reviews.